Hello, friends! This is People Are Interesting with Jan K. In each episode of this show, unique individuals share stories that take us on a ride across ideas and places. Featuring crocodile attacks in Indonesia, escaping war-torn Lebanon, and shark protection schemes in Mauritania. This podcast takes you where you've never been before. Enjoy and thank you for joining the club. Thank you very much for being here. I am with Giulia, who's one of my best friends, and we're actually going to be talking about your story, which I find personally incredibly interesting and inspiring, and I think it's going to keep a lot of people going. Do you want to kind of tell us about your background, how you got to where you are right now, and how was it like going through school, and just give us everything. It's super interesting.
Okay, that's a lot in one go. But hi everyone, I'm Giulia, and I'm originally from Naples, Italy. And I guess what you want to know is how the hell I got to London.
Yeah.
Okay, then...
I feel like you summarized it so much better than I did in only 3 words.
Well, I moved to London to study, so for opportunities. But there's also a more personal reason why I'm here, and that's because I thought that London would be the most inclusive city that I could ever be in. And I do agree with what I used to think when I was 17, when I made the choice, because I was born with a disability. I cannot see from my left eye since I was born, and that has caused me a bit of trouble when I was in school. Throughout education, I did not have any sort of support. But to be completely honest with you, is also because I didn't think there was any support to even ask. And when I was about 17, and I thought about even applying for university, I just came to the conclusion that studying in Italy wasn't an option for me, and that I instead needed to find a better place for me. And London was definitely the place to go.
Right. And can I ask you, because obviously everyone in their life, we have this moment when we kind of realized, oh, I am actually this person, the first time you kind of look in the mirror and you realize, oh, me is me. What was your experience in school when you started going to school, or maybe even kindergarten? What were the people like? Were people supportive of you, or did you feel, because a lot of, I have a sister with a learning disability as well, and oftentimes her experience was actually one of alienation. I feel like just society in Poland in many aspects just is not quite there yet when it comes to helping people with learning disabilities really, fulfill their their fullest potential. So what's it like in Italy?
Well, first of all, that's a really good question to ask. And if I had to answer more generally, in Italy, I don't think it's any different than in Poland. More personally, I think when I was a kid, so starting from kindergarten, I did not even know that I had a disability, or at least I didn't have the full understanding of it. So I would just pretend to be like any other kid. But I do remember some episodes of those people that I could refer to as friends that would sort of not invite me to parties, or not parties at the time, but those kind of reunions,
birthday parties and things like that.
Exactly. Or they would refer to me as the one who was not able to look straight in the eye, or they would not be talking to me because they thought I was talking to someone else, so they would turn around or anything like that. So those are the first memories that I have of actually feeling that there was something not wrong about me, but at least different about me. And it was not until I was 13, interestingly enough, that I actually understood that I had something going on, and that I had a disability. Because as I said, I was born with it. So I didn't really have any other measure. And I always thought that that's the way you see that's the way you're supposed to be seeing. Whereas I understood that I got this when I started having difficulties reading. When I was a kid, I didn't really see it as an issue, but growing up and focusing a lot on my studies and working with one eye only, I realized that I was having more and more difficulties keeping up with the same pace of reading so much and so quickly. So that's when I had the conversation with my mom, and when I asked her, look, there's something going on, and I think I need to see a doctor. And she said, well, I can definitely bring you to a doctor, but can you tell me more about what you're going through? And I remember that I told her that I had issues with the study books that I was studying on, because of course they were very.
No, keep going.
They were not as accessible as you might think, because the spacing was terrible. There was a lot of text, and so I was really pushing hard to make sure that I would read every single book for my classes and all of that. And I was having issues in the sense that I was not able to finish it by myself on time, or at least not in the time that I allocated initially. And I would start, my sight would start to fade. So that's when I actually went to the doctor, and the doctor told me, well, you need to just slow down a bit. And that's when my mom started talking about how my disability came together. And that's when I realized that, okay, I do have just one eye. I do have just that, and I need to preserve it as much as possible. And that's when I realized, as you were saying, that moment, okay, this is who I am. This is who I need to, this is what I need to be aware of. And it's that moment that I remember clearly, because that's when I started to think about myself in a different way, not necessarily in a bad way, just in a more conscious way. And I was in high school at the time, right? So I didn't have a lot of objectives to look forward to, at least, because I was just living day by day. I just had to survive high school, that kind of thing.
Yeah. As we all did.
Yeah, exactly. But I do remember that I started talking about it with my closest friends, so that I would create group studies, so that I wouldn't feel necessarily discriminated against, at least from the very close friends of mine. But I do remember that I didn't have the guts to say it to everybody in the class or to the professors. Probably because I felt ashamed, but also because my brothers were very popular in the school. I got two older brothers, and they were very known in the school. Like, they were the most beautiful guys and all of that. Dudes. Yeah, exactly. Nice. So I didn't want to ruin that reputation as well, for those to have like a little girl, like a little sister with any kind of problem in any way. So I literally did not say it ever in high school.
Really? Wait, so you went through the whole of your high school and you had no learning support throughout it?
Yeah. Let me correct myself though. I never said it until I couldn't anymore, because I had an ocular migraine at school, which basically means that I went blind temporarily. So of course I needed support. So I asked for it, and that's when I had to tell my professors that I was just pushing too hard, and because of my disability, ocular migraine could have been triggered way more easily than with any other person. And that was, I think, in my 4th year of high school out of 5. But still, I didn't go into detail at all, and I still did not receive any kind of support from the school for my studies. Is
it because there was just nothing out there? Like, there was no system of supporting people with learning disability in Italian, through Italian education system? What was the issue, in your opinion?
Unfortunately, I don't even know whether there was at the time, because I just didn't want to even ask for it, because I was ashamed. But also, I remember that there was no sort of conversation around it at all.
Right.
I went to a public school, but it was a very good one, probably the best one in humanistic studies, the one that I was doing. So maybe something could have been done about it, but I'm pretty sure that the funds were limited, so the kind of of technology that maybe I would have needed was not available. Also, there was a policy, no screens in school.
Right.
So, it's a bit complicated. And also I remember my final exam, so the senior year, I had to do, basically I had to write an essay in Italian, and I had 6 hours for it because I had to go through a lot of documents to then come up with an actual essay.
Right.
And I remember that the only thing that I asked for was to have the documents in accessible format, meaning enlarged and double-spaced and, if possible, in bold. And I remember saying that to my biology professor just because I know that she was going to be on the committee. And I arrived on the day as anybody else, and I received exactly the same copies as anybody else. So I asked the senior committee for those to be changed, and they literally told me there's no more time, we need to start because it's a centralized exam that everybody does at the same time. And my biology professor got so mad that she literally took the papers, went to the closest stationery, and just printed them out in a different format for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, knowing what you know now about what can you do to actually support people who have a learning disability, what would you do for yourself back in the day with all the kind of knowledge you have now?
Well, first of all, I would make sure that my 15-year-old self is confident enough to speak about it within her family first. So that was an issue with me. I didn't talk about my disability or how I felt about it or how negatively it was impacting me in any way, which meant in turn that I didn't want to talk about it with any other person that wasn't considered as my close friend.
Right.
So first of all, I would say that family plays the biggest role. And once you're comfortable enough in your house, I guess it's natural for you to be seeking help outside of it and understanding that seeking help is even more courageous than shying away from it.
Yeah.
And then I would probably make sure to discuss the topic of inclusion and adjustments with the school, because it's not a case-to-case basis. It has to be a sort of policy in place, and there needs to be conversation about it, because there shouldn't be any stigma associated with it whatsoever, right? So it should be basic, I would say now, to include it in every sort of at least initial conversation when someone joins the school, so that they know that the support is there. Whether they need it or not, or whether they would want to use it, that's a different story. And that is case by case dependent. But the fact that support is there should be, first of all, in place, and second of all, advertised.
Right. And what I gather from your story so far is actually, I see a lot of resilience, and it's actually a very positive story, all things considered. How did you find, energy and courage and whatever it was that actually got you through this, and that you're actually in like such a good place you are right now as a person, and you're like basically speaking up for other people, essentially, is what you're doing, raising awareness to this issue. Can you tell us a little bit more about this side of your journey, so to say?
Yeah, I think it can be easily divided into two moments. One is everything that goes till my 4th year of high school, and then everything that comes after it. And that's because before going into my final year, what motivated me is the fact that I managed to literally achieve everything that I put my mind to it by just doing things differently. and by creating new ways to solve problems. That includes recording myself with what I was learning rather than keep reading the same book that I couldn't read.
Right.
Or going on the internet and listen to so many videos about philosophers and historical moments in explaining many different ways, so that my oral examinations would go well and I would actually excel, because I would go above and beyond what they were expecting from me. And that's why I was first in the class anyways, even though nobody knew that I had a disability, or at least what kind of disability.
That is so crazy. Oh
I
my
know.
God, you were
But
top of your class and nobody even knew you have a disability.
Yeah. Well,
Oh
by the
my
time that I
God.
graduated, they did know.
Yeah.
But I have been forced on my class for a while and
That
they
is
didn't know
so
about
insane.
it. And that's because I was working behind the scenes to achieve the same results, because I was not able to just settle and give up. Also because I really was angry at the fact that I had the capabilities to do it, that I have the brains and I have the willingness. It's just my body that is not physically as up to standard as my brain, maybe. And that's so annoying. Trust me, when you realize that you cannot control that, you get angry. So the only thing that I could have done at the time was to find different ways and to push harder.
Right.
So that's what I did when I was in high school, until I actually had those ocular migraine events, because that made me realize that I needed to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And that my health came first. And also because those episodes were scary as hell. Of course, at some point you just can't see anymore, and it happens too regularly for you not to be careful. So I was trying to just think clearly about, okay, what is it that I need to do for school to be able to pass school, but also keep my reputation as a good student. But also, okay, what is it that I can do in the future after high school that can A, give me an education, but B, also makes me a better person. So that's why when I finished high school and I graduated, all good, top of my class, I had the grades to enter into uni in London. I thought, okay, but once I move to London, I need to be at a university that actually welcomes people with disabilities and has to be has to have a system in place. That's why I joined QMUL, and thanks to that I learned so much. And once I learned how giving support works, I started giving support by myself, so offline, and that's how I mentored so many people with disabilities, mostly international students, because I personally do not know a lot of Italian students who have a disability, but I have started talking about it with my family a lot, so that the conversation is not as stigmatized, so that every now and then I get to know some kind of friend who has a child that has a disability and doesn't know how to behave at school, and I can support them in that way. So indirectly also through my family, but mostly I've done it through university, and it's been great because I can do this without any sort of limits whatsoever. Anyone has a question to ask that makes your day, because you know that you can help them in some way. But also you'd be surprised by how many people actually do have a disability, whether that's visible or invisible. So it really does make a difference to their lives.
Yeah. One thing that there's a lot of questions, follow-up questions that I really want to ask. Let's take them one by one. First thing, what is it that about your mindset you think that, because I think it's a very unique thing, what is it in your mindset that you think other people could, learn from you? I see definitely a lot of empathy and a lot of willing to, share your good ideas, help other people. but also, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of resilience. But I'm sure you have thought about it yourself. What is it that it kind of, you know, keeps you going? I'm sure it's also ambition, but when you were saying that you came up with all those creative ideas, how to, you know, learn and absorb material that was there, that's a very unique mindset. And it's something I would kind of like want to pull out a little bit more.
Yeah, it is a very good question actually, and I think what makes you understand how to go forward, regardless of what your condition is and what your situation's like, is a lot of self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember when I was in high school and trying to come up with those different solutions. Of course, every module was different, so I needed to come up with very different study methods and all of that. That meant that I needed to know what is it that I was struggling with in the first place, and what is it that I wanted to share with others, what is it that I thought I couldn't do by myself, so I needed to ask help to someone. So there's a lot of self-reflection in there.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody I know from high school now tells me that I'm super strong, which I take as a compliment, but I remember not liking it back then, because it's not that I'm strong, it's that I did not have any other option but to be strong in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more about understanding what I was struggling with, to make sure that that wouldn't trigger any bad vibe or bad feeling, but instead motivate me to find something that could fight it, but at the same time that I could do it by myself, because I acknowledged when I was in high school that I was going to live a whole life with this disability, right? So it's high school now, but it's a job in 10 years, it's a family in a bit longer maybe, but it is a whole life that you need to live with this condition. So you have to first of all be okay with your own self, and that's how you become resilient, because you accept the situation and you take the most out of it, because you start understanding that you can see the condition in a different way. Because of course I do have a disability, but I have so many skills as a consequence of it. So if I know that I have to be careful with my studies and not pushing too much, I know that I can manage my time perfectly to avoid that and to prevent it, right? But I also know that I can communicate what I have and what I need well to others. So it's already some kind of skills that you develop, and most importantly the personal one, which is empathy. I do have a lot of empathy for people, because I know that everyone has a story. You just don't see it, or you don't ask for it, because sometimes you're too busy taking care of your own mess. But a lot of people do have a story to tell, so you just gotta listen and be there for them if they need you to. Otherwise you just act like you don't know anything about them, so that you can just be kind to them, because they're gonna appreciate your kindness anyways.
That made me think about 2 points that I wanted to make. First one was, why do you actually feel that in the society it's not the default that the society is inclusive of you know, not only people with disabilities, but also people that look differently to you, that, you know, maybe speak differently to you, and maybe have a different accent to you, that are just different? Why is it that we as people evolved or developed in a way that, like, actually things that are different to us, we tend to actually, like, stay away from rather than embrace them? Why do you think it's because it's in us, right?
It is in us, and it must be because of the people that we have near to us. Otherwise I don't understand it either. I just have to give myself this explanation, because it would be so much easier to be kind to others and to embrace whoever is it that comes your way. But if we don't, or generally speaking, if we're generalizing now and say that it's not as welcoming as we would like the society to be, it's because of the tradition that has been carried out before us. So I can see it in Italy, but I'm starting to see it differently since I've moved to London, because in Italy I can see it from my grandparents, who would not necessarily welcome maybe not even a person who hasn't gone to university, or at least they wouldn't look at it in the same way, or they would always wish for that person not to be marrying one of their grandchildren. You see what I mean? So it's that kind of vibe. Whereas in London, I've seen the complete opposite. I've seen people who literally move here just to be free, just to expose themselves as they want them to be. And it's also better in the workplace. In Italy, they're very traditional, and you can feel that that's very much a big part of someone's life, to be working and to be successful in work and all of that. But you also know that you need to be educated to get to that particular level or seniority. Whereas here you might even get to higher positions without even have a degree, for example. So it really depends on where you are. But overall, I think the reason why we're not as accepting is because we are scared to think differently than the rest, and because we are scared in general about the unknown. We don't know how to behave maybe around people who seem differently than us, when in fact you just need 30 more minutes to get to know the person. You'll see that you have so much in common.
Yeah, actually that made me think of celebrating some of the really cool stories of people with learning disabilities or whatever other disabilities. I actually remember you telling me this a couple of years ago.
Good that you still remember.
Yeah, I remember when you told me that you're friends with this guy who, I don't think he was fully blind, but he couldn't see very well. He was also studying at our university, and you told me that like he really like appreciates when people like don't approach him from like the back and don't pat him on the back, so like because it startles him, because he kind of like doesn't. Do you remember that story?
I remember him definitely, and I remember him because he's the first person who reached out to me by email, because there was a group of visually impaired students at QMUL, and he was the one reaching out saying, if you need any help, even though I'm not studying the same thing that you're studying, I can surely help you with other things. So I said, sure, why don't we meet? So we did meet, and he was fully blind.
Oh, he was fully blind.
Yes,
okay.
And I remember that he came by himself to the library where we were supposed to meet, and I saw a person approaching him, tapping him on the back, and he was comfortable with it. And I'm assuming because he recognized the voice immediately, so he was familiar with. But then something different happened, because another person approached him that he did not know, but in the same way in terms of tapping in the back, and he got very nervous. And that's because I realized that you have to develop a sort of relationship and trust with the person first, to then be okay with touching or anything really. So the fact that he had such reaction made me realize that you need to be careful, because even though you're doing it for good reasons, of course, you can very much upset them, right? So there needs to be an open conversation about how to even approach that person. But what really stood out to me that day was the fact that he was able to do every little thing by himself. And even the laptop that he was using a MacBook, and he was using VoiceOver as an application that basically reads everything for you. And it went so quickly because he was so used to using it that you couldn't even understand a single word that it was saying.
Oh, really?
But he was so used to it that it was so quick.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. Same with his phone. He would call people or answer my text messages on the spot by just using the VoiceOver, and he didn't even need the full seconds that you would need to actually hear the whole thing, because he would understand where this was going.
Okay.
And he was able to anticipate everything and be very quick. He would show me on the spot how to use VoiceOver and all of that completely by himself. And he also is a musician. So he literally has so many qualities.
Makes me think of Stevie Wonder.
Literally. He actually once told me that he went to Arabia's Got Talent.
Oh yes, I remember you told me that story. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true.
Imagine, he's such a
What,
boss.
what instrument was he playing? Or was he singing? What was he doing?
The
Flute?
not the flute.
Saxophone?
I can say it in Italian, but I'm not sure how to say that in English. Tromba.
Okay, a trumpet.
The trumpet.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, did he win?
No, he didn't. But he did pass, so he became quite famous.
Really?
I remember once he had to travel back just because he had a tour.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Wait,
cool.
what other adaptations did he have to kind of get along? Because you said that he was get by, I should say. Because you said that he got to the library completely on his own.
Yeah.
So like.
Well, I'm not sure whether that's because he was already super familiar with the environment. He was a year above me, so maybe that's the reason why he probably did have someone accompanying him during the first year. But the very great thing about the university is that they have the disability and dyslexia service that truly is very efficient. So you can ask for anything that you think should or would support your studies.
Yeah.
And I remember that he would have note takers for classes. He would have access to the assistive technology room, where he would have access to very nice screens with voiceover installed, where he would do all his research, all of that, so that he didn't have to bring his own laptop every time. Or I remember he has a lot of adjustments when it comes to exams. Actually, he could also do some exams orally, because of course he would rather do that than taking written exams and having to dictate everything.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Like I would not.
He had to do it though.
Yeah, but haven't
sometimes.
you had to do one of your exams where you were just dictating to someone the
I wasn't,
content of your essay?
I wasn't technically dictating to a laptop. I was just
someone,
sharing my answers with my scribe,
Yes.
because it was during probably my second exam ever, and it was a multiple choice exam, and I asked for the multiple choice exam sheet to be adjusted, and the university said, well, that's outside of our control, so basically it has to be this way. And given that I wasn't comfortable doing this by myself, or at least I was afraid that I would just mess up the lines for my own visual impairment, I asked for a scribe to be there, who by the way eventually also acted as a reader, because they did not provide me with the accessible version of the statute book. But this guy had to literally tick boxes for me because they couldn't adjust the paper. And he had to do that for about an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? Because you've mentioned this earlier on, and I want to go back to it, because it's when you told me this story, I was just my mind was blown away. And you basically just mentioned it right now, and like you didn't even provide much detail, and it's such a crazy story. Like periodically you lose your sight every now and then, and it happens randomly, right?
Yeah.
What was the medical term for it?
Technically it's called amaurosis fugax in Latin.
Okay.
But I call it ocular migraine.
Yeah, okay. So you can't see anything, and you can kind of see it coming a little bit before it happens, but it happens quite quickly, right? What were your coping mechanisms? Because you moved to a completely different country, you didn't know anyone, you didn't have probably nearly as good of a support system around you, and you had also this to deal with. And I remember you've mentioned this story where you were kind of out and about with some friends, and then everything just went dark, and you were in the middle of London, and anyone who knows how London looks like, it's a fucking hectic place.
Yes.
To get by if you have
I confirm
everything going well for you, and people are still clueless.
Yes, I actually laugh about it now, but it's happened, and it has happened in many weird places.
Really?
Yes. The weirdest for me is when I was watching a water polo match.
Yeah.
It was so sad. So I was actually
yeah.
enjoying the game. But anyways, I had a period in my life where I was actually scared, and that was of course at the beginning.
Yeah.
The very first time in my philosophy class, I actually thought I'd lost my vision. Thank God it came back. But the thing is that the scary part is that it happened every single month, and I couldn't control it because I couldn't anticipate it. And every time it happened, it lasted for a different period of time.
What was the longest?
12 hours. Yeah.
Oh my god,
12
that's so
hours
insane.
was the longest. Yeah, and the shortest would be like 30 minutes. Yeah, it's a lot, especially when you're completely clueless of what is it that's caused it. And I remember going to a lot of doctors to try and figure it out, and I would do a lot of exams to at least try and understand what was going on, and every exam was negative, so I would exclude there was a vascular problem or anything else. So the very last resource was the fact that it was a neurological issue. So that's when I started going to the neurologist, and that's when I started doing some sort of therapies, and I would do a 6 months pill therapy, 6 months of pill therapy, and that's when it started to go better. But then I remember a moment when I was in London already that I was off pills, and it happened. That was probably
the scariest.
Because I was like, okay, what do I do now?
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, why not? I remember that I was was with friends that I've known for a while now. You weren't there actually that time.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I learned about this story like, I don't know, maybe like a year later or so, because I don't think we were friends at the time when it happened. And when you told me this story, I was like, oh my god, this is so fucking crazy.
Yeah. I remember that I went out to a sort of party. It was supposed to be a party, but then not a lot of people show up, so it was
a typical dorm party when you live on campus.
Literally.
Like the lamest parties ever. I think I went to 2 of them, and I was like, oh my god, never. I just can't take this cringe. It's too much.
No, but it was nice because of course the people that were close to me already knew about this condition that I had, except for one, but that person is absolutely okay, and didn't really get scared. The issue is when other people don't know about it and start acting out. That's what makes me nervous.
Yep.
But when that happened, I was glad to be around others, because I was in a very dark area, and so most importantly an area that I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah.
Which is not usual for me.
Yeah.
Anytime that I enter into a new environment, within 30 seconds I already understand what's around me, so that in case it happens I can easily move around and everything like that. But we were out because we were on campus, but in an area that I would not normally go to, so I literally could not have done it without them. And I remember that I was particularly sad, not because I didn't know what to do, because of course I've had plenty of them at that point, but it's just that I really started thinking, okay, I do not know what else to do.
Yeah.
Because I've tried everything that the doctors have told me, and the doctors are literally the only people I can never trust on this, because I know nothing about it.
Yeah.
So that's where it started to feel a bit difficult to handle. But the thing is that I realized that in that moment I could have anticipated it, because I had a very strong headache. So what I did from then is that I started monitoring my headache, because that was the only thing that I knew that at least I could control. So that's when I started telling my neurologist that I should have monitored my headache and cure my headache, because turns out I was told that I had chronic migraines, and I like to believe that there is a connection between the two, even though it's not proved, but I really think that's a possibility. So what I've done since then is curing my migraine, at least my chronic migraine, so that I reduce the possibility for it to happen. And it's been a while now that it hasn't happened, because I also took some pills that actually those with epilepsy take, so that you reduce the possibility for the optic nerve to be hit in any drastic way. So I did that, and it's been like 8 months since I had my last episode. My last episode wasn't fun either, actually. I was doing a commercial awareness competition virtually, so I did not know anyone, and it happened, but I still did my presentation.
Wait, let's go back to the one where you were out. I just kind of wanna experience how it must be like. So like, where were you when you were like, oh shit, something is going like really wrong? What was your like environment?
Interestingly, that's not the one that I remember the most about, because I just remember my reaction to it more than how it happened or when it happened. But from what I can remember is that I was just leaving the dorm, and that I had Diala close to me, so a very good friend of mine, and I remember that they were looking for milk because someone in our group was very drunk, so they were looking for milk. And I remember that on our way to the supermarket from campus, so it's very close, I lost my vision, and I said to Diala that I had an episode. That's how we call it, an episode.
So was she aware of this condition of yours? Okay, fine.
Yes. So that's when everybody else then stood beside me and welcomed me back, brought me back home. But it wasn't intense in terms of, oh no, this happened to Giulia. No, some other episode was more like that than this one, but it just was important to me because it was in a moment that I truly did not need it or expect it. So that's why I remember it particularly. The others might think of it otherwise, especially because some of them experienced it for the first time. But for example, Diala was not surprised. She just went straight to helping mode.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, because the first time that I had it in London ever was with her, and it was also the first time that we actually hanged out together.
No, really?
Yeah, because we just met, we went to our first contract law class. I was in the middle of the class because I'm that kind of girl who really wants to see everything clearly.
Yeah.
And I remember that it happened during that class.
Really?
And I had Diala close to me, who did not know me very well, who did not know what to do. And I remember that I remained silent until the very end. And when everybody left, I'm sure you were there. You must have been there.
Exactly, that's such a trip.
Yeah, you must have been in my class, definitely. I remember that when everyone stood up and I could hear the noise, I then said, Diala, this is what's going on. Don't freak out, because I'm not going to. But please take the medicine in my bag with the water. I always had to carry it out just in case. So she poured the medicine in the water and she gave it to me, because that would allegedly accelerate the process of gaining my sight back. But that's something that I've never proved. So I don't know whether that actually worked. I'm not sure if that actually worked. But we were on campus, and I used to live on campus, right? So she then helped me to go back to my dorm. It was the very first time that we actually had to hang out together, so imagine how scared she was. And I remember that we were listening to music, especially to Mika, because I like Mika a lot. And I remember that she was just there trying to talk about things, to kind of distract me as well. and until I gained my sight back. So at that point, she left because she was, she was feeling better, because she didn't want to leave knowing that I was still in that condition. And honestly, years after, I would say even 2 years after, she told me that that was the moment that she really got a sort of connection with me. That's why we are so close, and we even managed to go and live together.
Yeah.
But also, more generally, it's the moment that she realized that she could do anything, because at that time she was doubting whether she wanted to continue university at all. And when she saw me pursuing my university goal on top of having this condition, having to deal with so many personal hurdles, she said, okay, if she can do it, then I can do it too. I don't need to complain about my life, which is, perfect, and I have everything I need.
Yeah.
And that was such a beautiful moment when she told me.
Yeah, that is a really nice thing to hear indeed. What's I had this really interesting thought that oh yes. What's for average Joes like me, what can we do to actually, I don't want to help, assist, like just like how should we, be more inclusive, like everyday people? What's your opinion on that?
My opinion on that is that there is no one way to be inclusive, because every person has, first of all, a different condition, but also experiences the same condition differently. I am a visually impaired person, but that doesn't mean that I know how every visually impaired people lives. Like, every condition is completely subjective, which means that if you want to help someone, you need to understand their specific condition, okay, but also the specific way in which they're living with their condition. And if you're close enough to them, it's just a matter of asking questions and seeing if they're comfortable answering them. If they're not, that means that it's not really about you, it's just their kind of way of going about it. In that case, you just need to make sure that you're there in case they want to ask for help. And you just say that, and that really makes a difference, that in case they need any kind of support, they can think of you as a person to go and ask. If they are willing to answer some questions, for example, I'm one of those people, show that you're interested in knowing more about them and how they feel and how they deal with their disability. Because in that case, they can, first of all, they will feel better by just talking about it and knowing that there's someone who's willing to listen. But also, more generally, you can create that connection that builds a very strong trust, so they will come back to you if they need help, because they know that they can trust you, and they can see in you the person that understands them. Whereas I feel that if you don't show that sort of understanding, they might think, no, I'm not going to ask him because that's too much to ask, or he might be busy, he might be too much to explain. Whereas if you're already in the position to show that you not only understand but you're willing to help, it will be so much easier for both of you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And because we already clocked 45 minutes, so we're gonna be wrapping that one up.
You can cut so much of what I've said, I'm sure.
But one thing that I find really interesting, and maybe that could be our last stop in this episode, is what were some of the interesting and inspiring things that you learned from other people with learning disabilities, or any disabilities whatsoever, actually? Because even in our conversation, it was quite obvious to me that you, and also observing my sister, it's very obvious that you develop skills and different ways of dealing with the issues you have to deal with, or whatever the problems might be, and that's incredibly interesting to me. And a lot of times it's also really inspiring. I think like the last 45 minutes is basically a proof of that. So yeah.
It's a really hard question to answer because I've met so many people with many kinds of disabilities, both visible and invisible. So it's hard to give you one answer in terms of what I've learned. But I think that I can give you an idea by giving you an example. So when I was in my second year, I knew that I wanted to pursue a career in law, so I just said, okay, I'm the only person I know who with a disability, so it's best not to talk about it with anyone, interviewers or in my applications, nothing. Then, the more I talked to people, the more I understood that they had a condition too. I started attending events and meeting people because I'm a very social person. So I would then understand more about them, get to know more about them, and find out that they would have a condition too. Until I met the president or CEO maybe of this consultancy firm whose job is to make our lives easier to find a job. I really thought that I didn't have to disclose anything or share anything about my disability. So the moment I met this person, she's on a wheelchair, she actually told me that the way you see yourself is one thing. The way you want others to see yourself is another. So you have to be okay with both to be happy with your life. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I've got, because I was comfortable with my own skin and with myself, but I wasn't comfortable with the way the others would see me. So the moment I started being open, confident, positive about my disability, I really benefited from it. And I just became a better person because I let others see myself the way I see myself. And given that I met so many other people who wanted to pursue my same goal, who had another kind of disability, I tried my very best to share that with them as well. And so I guess that lesson then was put forward and shared with many other people. And I'm still doing it because I really think that's the most important thing ever.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful and powerful message to actually close the episode with. And it is a very inspiring and a beautiful story. I think anyone who's kind of just, dealing with the things they have to deal with, it's an amazing thing. And I just thank you so much for sharing your story and just, educating me and everyone who will listen to it. I think it was just an interesting and inspiring to find out all about that. And it's a very long outro, so just without a further ado, thank you very much for being here, and best of luck for the future, and thanks for everyone who will tune in to listen to it.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you.